What's up, everybody? It's so great. Robert, this is your third time on the channel now. We're changing the format slightly. Instead of a non-gamer reacts, which unfortunately you are no longer, I can no longer use that as an angle.
Yeah, apparently. I saw this in the comments that people objected to this last time
They
around.
did object. Well, you've really sort of taken on this concept of challenging video games and sort of run with it. And one of our episodes was exclusively Fromsoft music, which is
the
amazing.
last time we spoke. At that point, I had played Elden Ring, Sekiro, and the Dark Souls trilogy, but I didn't have a PlayStation, so I hadn't played Demon Souls or Bloodborne.
Bloodborne.
And you showed me some of the music from Bloodborne, and I went out and immediately got a PlayStation 5 because I had to play this game.
This time I've had you actually come and bring me your favorite tracks that you've recently listened to, and also I will definitely, if we have time, which I think we will, showcase some other stuff that I think you'll like, probably within the same vein. But also, I think that there's some pieces like Nier Automata that I think you would absolutely adore that that should be on your radar, and some new stuff that's recently come out. So why don't you go ahead and give me, we'll just switch, so everything we did with when it was me, you're the boss now. So this is natural for you as a conductor. We're let me assume my former role.
Okay, well, the first track that I chose was actually from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And the reason I chose this is because this is the first sort of modern generation game that I played. And this was after you and I met in 2019, and you were the one that told me about Nintendo Switch and that you could travel with it, but also plug it into your television. And you told me about a couple of games on this system. And I thought, man, that sounds really fun. And I looked up some of the stuff that was playable on this system, and I saw that there was a new version of, or a new Legend of Zelda game. And this was one of the games that I loved when I was a kid, the OG Legend of Zelda in the 1980s. So I got a Switch and started playing this game. And musically, I thought the soundtrack was amazing. A lot of sort of atmospheric piano music, and the whole game has this sort of meditative quality to it, kind of dreamlike. And also because so much of it is based around this open world exploration, a lot of sort of ambient piano music and whatnot. And then when you arrive towards the climax of the game and you get towards Hyrule Castle, finally we get sort of a bigger, more kind of symphonic piece. And I wanted to play a little bit of that for you, and maybe we can talk about it a little. This is the Hyrule Castle, a bit of the exterior music, and then also the transition when we move inside the castle.
Wow.
I thought there were so many things that were really, even when I remember playing the game and when I finally got to this part of the game, thinking like, how amazing that this sort of opens up into this new space with a much sort of a much more dramatic, much more intricate orchestral writing, the footsteps as you're kind of making it outside, this incredible change of ambiance when we make it inside the castle. And later on, I guess there are fragments that sound like previous bits from other Zelda games here. I think there are like 4 or 5 little quotations, some pretty obvious and some a little bit more subtle. There's even one that's sort of like I never played this game, the Ocarina of Time, I think it's called, but I know that there's a low health sound that happens in this game that they also incorporated into this sort of beep, 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 when you hear the sort of lullaby music with the organ inside. So I think that's right. I never played this game, but again, you don't really need all of that context to enjoy it. I just remember when I first listened to it, like, this is so cool to hear this multi-layered, very intricate textured music finally at the climax of this game.
It is interesting because I mean, like the general consensus is that it's a really good soundtrack, but it definitely deviates from that standard, you know, especially, you played the original in the 80s, like that was when the melodic writing was so expansive, even within that sound chip, but like it was just constant melody and you know, musical momentum. So then in Breath of the Wild, what I find really interesting about Breath of the Wild, having started sort of to replay it on the Switch 2 now, is that I actually never finished it. There's this, what I find really interesting about Breath of the Wild is how it balances the sound of nature and the music, almost like this is kind of reaching, but in the sort of John Cagean sort of like the sound of music is like the sound of the world around you, the sound design.
Yeah, that's right, because there's a lot of ambient music that leaves space for what we're hearing in the world.
Because then there's the piano where it's like ba-di-ba-bum, you know, and then when you're fighting the I forgot their names, the in the very beginning, the bokoblins, that's right. And then on top of that, what I found really appealing about this is that, imagine then you have all this ambient piano music to then as you make your approach into Hyrule Castle, which is essentially like from the very get-go of the game, when you meet the old man who ends up obviously being the king.
You see it in the distance. You know you're going to go there.
Present, to have it thrust into this, and then you have that really interesting because you have the heartbeat quality, which to me feels like, okay, we're getting closer to this actual like true danger, and also the emotional stakes, because we know Zelda's in that castle.
That's right.
And so, like, to then have the original theme pop in, also to the piano with all that dissonance as it like it's really cool. And then it's really interesting too how the inside then pivots into something like Zelda's lullaby and, you know, the other things you mentioned, but like it does so in a way where it's, even though it's probably, I actually haven't seen it, so I mean, I'm assuming it's like super dilapidated and like run down and possessed by all the like Calamity Ganon red stuff.
The inside of the castle is quite twisted in that way. But so to have this eerie kind of organ music is the perfect change of atmosphere.
It is interesting though, isn't it? Because the organ still, in some ways, to me, still symbolizes the like religious, holy aspects of the castle, even though it's been... It's almost like it blends the two. You know how the trope is like using organs for evil things? Do you know this trope in video games?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I've played enough games now that I sort of... I can see a few of these sorts of things that rhyme. Whereas I think that Zelda is doing something pretty subtle here with that trope, because also exactly, it's doing both things at the same time. Also, it's interesting that we hear the organ playing Zelda's lullaby theme, so because we know she's in the castle, that's also when we hear that sort of low health music, which I think is meant to sort of be kind of a wink in the direction of the fact that, you know, she's in the castle, but she's sort of like holding back, you know, Ganon. And we are coming there, and, you know, we're both gonna destroy him together, basically.
Salvage, Do you feel like conversations where you're sitting down and talking about music, how common is this in the field, in the classical music field? Like when you're not just producing, I've been thinking about this a lot, like the difference between like doing and talking, and I think there is an art in how to articulate things clearly, and how to, especially for you as a conductor, when you're trying to rally 60 plus people to kind of sound the same. I mean, do you feel like this kind of conversation happens maybe both verbally and non-verbally in day-to-day, work?
Yeah, as far as a conductor goes, I think if you can express something non-verbally or get an idea across non-verbally, it's about 100 times more effective. Because in a way you can be more precise if you get that idea across in a feeling, in a gesture, in a sort of look. And okay, you do of course have to say some things to an orchestra or to a soloist or whatever to try to sometimes get on the same wavelength. The first part of your question, is this really common? I don't know. Sometimes I think I kind of wish that in the classical music field we would do more of this, like really talking about the music that we're playing, because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the technical elements of putting it all together that sometimes the music almost can get a little bit sort of lost in this, because obviously it depends on the musician or the soloist you're talking to. Some people have a tremendous amount to say about the music that they're interpreting. Some people it's more on a instinctive level. Some people it's on an instinctive level, but also they have a lot to say about it. Some people are quite analytical and some more technical, I guess.
It has definitely been interesting, as I basically, at this point, spend nearly every day in some capacity or other, whether it's playing a game on stream or doing my videos or now I do more like grouping videos where it'll be about a specific genre. So like fighting game music and kind of exploring. It's interesting because there are plenty of folks online who create videos based around theory and like the chordal structure and things, and obviously that's not my strong suit. That's not what I was, that's not what I'm trained to do. To me, the core tenet of is really based around not so much the analysis of a piece, but really around the conversation of a piece, because I feel like the way that we, like you and I both felt the Hyrule Castle OST in more or less the same way, but there is so much nuance even within those, like there's still more. We just had like a 5-minute conversation about it, but like there's so much more that we could still talk about going measure by measure, and I find
it's a deep pool. I mean, we could go as you could do an entire video just about that, about that track and go into it as far as you want.
Well, even just like the first 30 seconds unlimited. I mean, I think that's the thing that I find challenging about this particular YouTube format and the YouTube medium, is that I find the conversation of music, just talking about it, so meaningful versus like the hyper analysis of like the individual notes. And I just brought this up because you were talking about how some folks are very technical, and to me it's like just being able to talk about it is valuable.
Absolutely.
Because we don't talk about music really. I mean, do you ever just sit down and talk about like the power of, I don't know, Ravel or Puccini within, because I mean, when you're working.
Sometimes it's been really fun to do when you get a chance to do like let's say like a pre-concert talk or something like that, where you sit down with a part of the audience that like wants to come to this sort of thing, and you try to show them a little bit of what you think is interesting in this piece. And in general, I think when you get a chance to do that, even though our own sort of individual analysis will probably be very technical and we'll go into details about, there's a really technical component to analysis. But then when we're talking to an audience and just sort of trying to get the main idea across, we're trying to step back a little bit, and anything that we say that's analytical will probably be pretty focused and really hopefully give them another key to help them unlock something in the music as a listener. And the person who I felt who did this better than anybody that I've ever seen is actually Leonard Bernstein, who is obviously like top level musician, one of my heroes, and just an all around brilliant person. But when he was music director of the New York Philharmonic, and he, orchestras everywhere, they do concerts for young people, right? They're trying to introduce people to an orchestra, and very often music directors, they farm out these concerts to the assistant conductor or to a young conductor or something like that. And Bernstein, he felt that these were the most important concerts he would do as music director. So he conducted these young person's concerts. And not only did he conduct them, but he wrote them. Like, and he would revise these texts down to and like, not every time we're talking about music, it has to be so, prepared and like really highly written and whatnot. But these concerts are absolutely brilliant. And they're all available on YouTube.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to go and he will not, he doesn't dumb it down at all or sort of like talk down to anybody. He's talking, if you're 5 years old and in the audience, or 10 years old or 70 years old, you have something to learn from these concerts. They're just absolutely wonderful. I saw a clip from one of them earlier today, and I was just once again blown away by the brilliance of this guy.
They're on YouTube for anybody watching that wants to just even see what we're talking about, because they are absolutely crazy, and just the depth that Bernstein was able to go into while also keeping it sort of like very off the cuff. It almost feels like it's improvisational, like he's just kind of talking. That's a great illusion, because he did. I know that he really wrote them, and he took a lot of time to sort of like rework them, but because he was so talented as a speaker, he gives this impression that you almost think that he just sort of like makes it up off the top of his head. And he'll go into really interesting and difficult concepts, like what makes music symphonic, for example. And he'll do like a half hour or 45 minutes all on that concept, with illustrations, either him at the piano or the New York Philharmonic behind him. And they're really quite amazing. So next up, well, funnily enough, that was an unintended segue, but actually here, next up, we've got the main theme from Dark Souls 3. We're getting into something really pretty symphonic here. Yeah. So this is the game that I played right after Elden Ring. Elden Ring was my first experience with a FromSoft game. I loved that game so much. I mean, the learning curve was really very steep, because you can imagine, like, even the character creation screen was just like, what on earth is going on here? What is, astrologer, warrior, like prisoner? What does any of this mean? But anyway, I love that game so much. Afterwards, I immediately started Dark Souls 3, because I knew that this was sort of part of the same lineage of games. And when I started up Dark Souls 3 and heard this main title music, I just remember sitting on this main title screen, like waiting for the whole theme to play. Like every time I loaded up the game, I couldn't believe that this was music from a video game. too much to say about that. You know, I have such a massive soft spot in my heart for this game. This is probably now. I didn't. What's funny is that when I first started reacting to this music or like talking about this music, like I played Dark Souls 3 like New Game Plus like 6, but I didn't remember a single bit of the music because I was so busy like trying not to die the entire time. I know people that's like unbelievable, but that's actually true. Like because you're so focused on like the game experience that it's really easy to not even like I mean you hear it but you don't like feel it.
I know exactly what you mean, especially like some of the confrontations are so incredibly intense, and also there's so much other music other sounds happening, because sometimes like the screeching in like the battle against Ludwig or the cleric beast or something like that actually it's one of the reasons why these games they repay repeated playthroughs. When you kind of know what's going on now, you kind of know where to go, so you can sort of soften your eyes and ears a little bit and take in more, hear more, remember more. And actually it's funny to hear this again now, because the latest part of my FromSoft odyssey was that after our last conversation, when you showed me this incredible music from Bloodborne, I went out, played it, then played Demon Souls. I realized that I had more or less played all of the games backwards. Not exactly backwards, but kind of.
More or less, yeah.
That I started with Elden Ring, and then... So I had played Demon Souls, and I think right after Demon Souls, Shadow of the Erd Tree came out. Mm-hmm. And so then I played like the oldest thing and the newest thing. And I realized that there's so... you can really feel the DNA in all of these games, and even back in Demon Souls, you can see little ideas that are going to grow into other things. But my one sort of regret was kind of like, it would have been just so amazing to discover these things as they were coming out, and see the development of the mechanics. So this year in January, I just had this totally insane idea, which was to play all of the main Miyazaki games again, but this time at base level. So Soul Level 1.
Did you do that?
I am now
base level.
Yeah,
like never leveling up.
Yeah, yes, at Soul Level 1 or Blood Level 4, And so now I have finished Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 with the DLCs. Now I'm in Bloodborne. I've made it up to Lady Maria.
Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah.
So leveling up.
Yeah, at Blood Level 4. Ludwig at Blood Level 4. Let me tell you, man, that is no joke.
Oh my God.
Some people are going to think that this is a hot take, and I think some people also might think that this is a base take. But actually, I think these games are more fun at base level.
Purely skill?
Yeah, and because it will, you just have to go into it like being willing to die and to learn and whatnot. Constantly. And that is just part of it. But it will give you more time to really appreciate the mechanics. And then you will never have the sort of moment where, like, for instance, another track that I almost put on this list today that I love from Dark Souls 3 is the Abyss Watchers theme. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's such an amazing boss fight, right? But in my first playthrough, I think because I did things in kind of a funny order, I had a slightly too upgraded weapon. So I didn't know... I really didn't understand the fight, and somehow was able to sort of make it through. Like, it might have even been the first time, like a first try or something like that, but not because I was good or I knew what I was doing, just because I happened to be leveled to a certain point where now this fight wasn't as challenging as it could have been. Yeah. Whereas when it's base level, then suddenly you really have to, for every fight, understand the mechanics and how it works and whatnot. And it's not, I am not a super skilled gamer or anything. It's just...
Dude, I don't know, man.
No, seriously. Seriously. But, I mean, Ludwig, at Blood Level 4, this fight was tough, And then, but at some point, this is where the fun begins in the immortal words of Anakin Skywalker. At some point, something kind of clicks inside, and you're starting to react a little bit more in the flow of the fight and sort of intuitively, and you're not sort of like, you're not really thinking, and suddenly you realize, like, oh my God, I'm not using any of my heals, because now the flow of the fight has sort of been integrated
like a dance,
now.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And with the best fights in the series, like I would put Ludwig there, or Sister Frida, or Gael. Midir is another one. Like all of these are just so brutal when you start doing them. And then at some point, once you play them enough, it starts to have this dance-like quality to it, and it's So I don't know. It's either a hot take or a base take, but I'm sticking by it. I think they're actually even more fun at base level.
I think a lot of people would agree with that. Most anybody that's really like a FromSoft person would absolutely say that that's a pretty base take. I mean, it's interesting because I actually recently went back and started playing Dark Souls 3 just for fun, and I was struggling a bit on so I accidentally triggered, I killed the woman in to fight the dancer early.
Oh, yeah. You can do that and go straight to the castle.
And let me just say, like, there's something about, like, not watching the HP bar go down very fast that is very triggering if you're not careful, because I had hit a little bit of a wall with Vort just because of some of the ice stuff. And anyway, all that to say, like, I think it's a really interesting take, and we're going to get to a very long conversation about rhythm and dance when we get to Sword Saint Isshin. But I think it's cool, and I mean, to me, this theme in particular is so beautiful and melancholic, and it has this, like, it's interesting because it does have like this distinctive forward momentum, even though you get these, like, but then you get the I mean, let me ask you a question about music. Musically, I know this was you had this, like, taste of, like, wow, I can't believe video game music can be like this. But do you feel at this stage, like, that, would you be embarrassed if, like, one of your colleagues was like, what is video game? Why? Would you be like, no, you don't understand, and then play it? And then, I mean, I don't think you ever criticized or judged video game music, but do you feel like this is, like, is it as good as, some of the stuff you'll do on a typical concert?
For me, kind of, I would say that music is music, and as much as possible, I kind of try to, want to erase the boundaries between it. And different music is meant to do different things, and therefore it's sort of structured in a different way. One of the things that I really liked, so I mean, I think this is just, by any measure, this is excellent music. And you could hear it just even, I remember, like, the first note when we hear this bell, and this was my first Dark Souls game. Mm-hmm. I didn't yet know, like, what an important motif this was for, in Dark Souls in general, this idea of bells. And I guess we also get them in Sekiro, and, like, I think Miyazaki really had kind of a thing about this, and that it finds its way into the music. But straight away, I can feel that this is a composer, in this case, Yuka Kitamura, who really has a voice. She has fingerprints. You can recognize kind of when it's her. There are, not because she's repeating herself, but because she has a real personality. And she really understood the directions from Miyazaki, like the sort of atmosphere that they were going in the game. It's like one of these perfect marriages. And actually, I mean, I think the soundtracks in all of these games are really good, and quite different in Elden Ring because they had more different composers working on it. Yeah. So it's kind of less homogenous, which has its pluses and minuses. I kind of think that there's something really magical about Dark Souls 3 because I think I'm right in saying that the vast majority of it was Yuka Kitamura, who wrote
I'm fairly certain it was mostly her, yeah.
It has this sort of, like, real symphonic kind of coherence. You can really feel you're always in the same game. And it also allows her to really create an amazing structure in this game. Like the next track that we were going to listen to is kind of basically the climax of the game. Yeah. And you can recognize a couple of her musical fingerprints that manifest themselves in a really different sort of way. So, but finally, I've never really gotten any pushback from anybody who was saying, like, why do you like this?
Has it even come up in conversation ever?
I said not really, but I guess I don't really get the chance to talk about it with too many people. So I did want to mention this so last year when you and I had our Bloodborne conversation where you were trying to convert me to the rest of the FromSoft catalog. It's maybe like a month later or something like that, right after the video came out. I went and I was doing a production of La Traviata. And for this production, there was quite a young professional chorus. Like, they were all between the ages of 20 and 30 in this chorus. And after a week or so, one of the guys from the chorus came up to me and he was like, I've been trying to think of this all week, but I think I recognize you. Weren't you a guest on Marco's channel? It's like, it's this was so great. So no, I didn't get any pushback from this young dude. Like, he thought this was great. So anyway, get back to this Dark Souls and Yuka Kitamura. I think there's just so much to admire in this music, and really you could do an entire analysis about why it fits the world so well and how well it's constructed. But one thing that I'd like to highlight in her music, well, maybe just a couple of things. She has a really great sense of progression. You can always feel sort of where we are in the structure and where we're going, and when there's a sort of big release moment. And I think that's really special, and not every video game music composer can do that, because a lot of this music has to happen on a loop. If you play it, this level, the boss fight might take like 5 minutes. If you play like Ong Ball, it might take, a minute and a half. But the music still has to make sense,
I will say one of the problems about Elden Ring. Now, I like Elden Ring soundtrack a lot, but one of the inherent problems with it is because there's a phase 1 and a phase 2, it becomes very predictable how it has to be phase 1 is a little bit more quiet and phase 2 is much bigger. That's
true, that sometimes you can feel it's not such an easy problem to resolve, how to do a 2-phase fight in a way that is that's surprising and satisfying. I do think that for a bunch of tracks, Yuka Kitamura finds some wonderful ways to solve this challenge, and a few other composers do as well. Another fight where that is really successful is Ludwig, I think, because those 2 phases are so totally different, and not necessarily in he doesn't get more wild and more bestial, right? He remembers that he was this old hunter with
human.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, when you're involved in this battle, you really have to sort of like calm yourself down after the hectic nature of phase 1, and the music, because it starts to sort of like, it has more swing to it in the second phase. Anyway, I thought that was one example of how a 2-phase fight it doesn't feel formulaic at all, because the story, the gameplay, the music, it all comes together.
Well, let's pop over to the Twin Princes and listen to that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about it. It really is interesting how the beginning is sort of disjointed because you have the two separate identities and then they morph into one, and all of a sudden the unifying part of it comes together and you get this really strong male chorus that just sort of guides us. A lot of unison movement in that second phase.
Yeah. I think this is another example of where the two-phase structure really works, both in the fights and also musically. Also because I think there's this part in the lore where the one brother is mute. He's, given over part of his, his strength to help his other brother stay alive and whatnot. Yeah. So that's why, she saves the chorus for the entry of the second part, which always has like a tremendous impact each time I've done this fight. And also the gameplay of it, the atmosphere of it's so beautiful. And for me, this is really the climax of the game. I mean, afterwards you have Nameless King is kind of like a separate thing. You can fight him whenever you want. And Soul of Cinder kind of feels like a coda, to wrap it all up. Whereas like the actual structural climax feels like
the Twin Princess.
Yeah, it's this climax. And again, we can hear that it's the same composer, right? From the, from the main title theme. We have a similar kind of musical fingerprint, this love of like a bass pedal that for quite a lot of it, the basses are sitting on this one note. Yeah. But nevertheless, she's able to create a real sense of harmonic motion. And actually, when the bass starts moving and we end up sort of moving towards these big cadences, which are kind of like the big sort of like resolution moments, it has tremendous emotional impact, I find. And also great vocal writing. Like apparently she's a singer and also a violinist, right? And on some of these tracks, I think it's her playing.
The main theme is, I think, her playing and or singing. For sure singing, I'm almost positive.
Yeah, I think she's doing both in the main theme. And I think we can really feel how much that has sort of like informed her composition. Because she always has a great feeling for melody, for violin writing, for string writing. Even when they don't have the main material musically, they're always doing something interesting inside the texture. I think she's a classic example. In this universe of video game music, of the principle that it's the inside of the tune that makes the outside sound good. And this is something that with orchestras, I'm often trying to kind of highlight this, that sometimes it's what's going to really make the first violins or the main theme sort of shine is often the inner voices, what's happening in the second violins, what's happening in the violas. Like that, if that part of the musical texture really works, then the main theme, whether it be a soloist or some main part of the orchestra, can really shine.
It's such an amazing thing to say, because oftentimes when I hear a harmony, in some ways the harmony it's like it's the shadow, on text, when you have the white text and you put a little bit of shadow and suddenly the shadow of the white text pops. The harmony, it's amazing too, because if the harmony is like, let's say it's a higher harmony versus a lower harmony, how do those make a difference to the tone of the main motif or main melodic line that's being played, depending on, the position of the harmony? And then like, what if it's a really close, like a third, how different the third sounds versus a fifth or a seventh or a sixth, that's like, it's amazing how you're right. The inner voices are often the unsung heroes, just because they create that like lift of the main thrust of the piece. It's so true.
Yeah, it's kind of like sometimes the outside of the painting, or even is the thing that will really make the main part of the painting really sort of pop. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. But one thing about this question of intervals, I was thinking like, this is something that I think singers understand really well intuitively, because when you're making an interval, it's, your body is your instrument. So the difference between like an interval of a third or of a sixth is so different, or even an octave, like massive difference. And sometimes I think it's good for people with a more instrumental background to kind of remember that. And I think it's one of the reasons one of the things that separate like a really good orchestra that's used to playing with singers and that's good at playing opera and symphonic music. They're very sensitive to this, because sometimes when you have a larger interval, it just needs a little bit of time or something in order to really like make that interval mean something. Mm-hmm. Whereas for some instruments, you just from here to here, it's or like on a piano, for example. But a really great pianist still knows how to let us feel those those intervals. So that's another thing from these two tracks that we just listened to that I think that Kitamura does really well, that we feel these differences in register and texture, and when she's, because she has this vocal and instrumental background.
She has a delicate touch with it, and it's such a great point too. I mean, there's such a significant difference between a third and like an octave jump, and like within a fifth, like. And also too, I mean, the idea, I had a piano coach a long time ago. I had a coach who said, you never want to just like land on the subsequent note. You really want to give it somewhere to go. So you don't want to just have it be one volume. You want to really like, especially if it's an interval jump, to go ha, ha, to lean into that second note and then actually crescendo into it. So you're not just going ha, ha, which is kind of.
Which is just, note doesn't mean anything. It's like.
But that's the intricacy of musicianship that I feel people don't necessarily know the complexity of like the fine tuning, because anybody can do a note, an interval, but the difference is between, an interval that's musical versus an interval that's just an interval,
Yeah, that's right. And there are even sort of like acoustic mysteries about this. Like sometimes if you have, say, on a violin or something, you have an interval, a sizable interval, like let's say a fourth or something like that. Well, if you just play both of those notes, let's say like an F and a C at exactly the same volume, well, to the ear, the C might sound a little bit softer because it's lower down. So sometimes with an orchestra, you'll kind of have to encourage them to remember to sing a little bit more the lower notes in order to really create the illusion of a completely even sort of legato. Right. Otherwise, you might have these little sorts of bumps in the sound if what you're going for there is this sort of like really even sound. But yeah, it's true that this is a sort of thing that like we talk about a lot in sort of in music business, and I think a lot of people maybe don't really get a chance to see behind the curtain so much about how does that fine tuning happen.
And they say conductors don't provide any value.
Hey, a lot of us don't, so that's not entirely wrong.
I recently finished this game just a couple weeks ago, and it bumped from my most hated Fromsoft game to my most beloved. I think now it might be tied with Bloodborne, if not slightly better than Bloodborne. But Sekiro, you brought Sword Saint Isshin, which truly what a memorable experience from. I mean, really the whole game. I mean, I really locked in. I really, honestly, like, it's interesting because of the themes, some of the themes that I found really, I think, honestly, even though he was the most frustrating, the Demon of Hatred probably had my favorite OST.
Fantastic OST. 2. Yeah. Demon of Hatred, to me, that sort of felt like, it's kind of like a Dark Souls boss, in Sekiro. There's one other guy, I remember my first time playing Sekiro when I made it to the armored guy on the bridge.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, what is this game? I was so confused because I was playing it blind, and I was like, this guy looks like he comes from a totally different game. Yeah. And then you finally defeat him, and then he stands back up, and you're like, wait, what is going on?
What am I supposed to do here?
And so somehow, like, I accidentally knocked him off the ledge or something like that. And then as he's falling down, he says, "Robert!" And I was just like, what is this game? And why is he screaming my name, How did he know?
So you brought Sword Saint Isshin. Which phase is this?
This is both parts of the soundtrack.
Oh, both parts.
They get through it pretty fast in 3 minutes here.
All right. It is so chaotic, isn't it?
Isn't it though? I feel like that's the perfect soundtrack for that fight, and also to sort of sum up that very special game. And I kind of feel like the soundtrack for Sekiro in general kind of gets slept on a little bit. I'm not sure exactly why that is. Maybe because some of the mini bosses have kind of more repetitive sort of flow style music. I'm not quite sure, because I think the soundtrack is masterful. Even the opening generic is gorgeous, and the way the music sort of like flows in and comes down and then restarts, which I think is kind of a metaphor for the Shadows Die Twice sort of, kind of thing.
That's true.
Also, the use of these traditional Japanese instruments, the
taiko,
this drum, this flute, and I saw on YouTube there's a short interview with this one also is Kitamura, who was talking about how usually they sort of were doing a mix of some live instruments, some digitally sampled instruments and whatnot, and they really had to do quite a bit of live recording for this one to get these Japanese instruments to give the kind of particular color. She also said that Miyazaki gave her the note of that they were really going for something sort of more violent, and he wanted something more violent in the soundscape, which is incredible when you think that this game was in development after Bloodborne, because it's kind of hard to imagine. But it's not quite the same sort of violence. It doesn't feel quite as nightmarish. It feels more sort of like gritty and real, and all of these are just one-on-one, sword fights basically.
It's just such an immensely. I think. To your point, based on my understanding and what I kind of experienced while playing it, really trying to pay attention not only to the music but also the gameplay. Like I felt that overall, what I ended up to your point of violence, I think that's really maybe why it's slightly slept on, because of the way the taiko is pervasive and rhythmically very intense. I think what ends up happening is we tend to get this like musical violence where it's just very heavy-handed in a positive, not in a pejorative. Like
in a sort of like aggressive,
so,
let's go sort of way.
In terms of a listening experience, I think it really is probably maybe the one from the rest of them was really hard to listen to out of context because of its sense of like brutality and the sense of like constant. I mean, obviously, examples are, Lady Butterfly is different. The owl, the second one in particular.
Oh, the owl father theme. One.
Yeah. Demon of Hatred as well. I think Isshin is perfect to me because it's like this is the culmination of this massive sort of like in his prime, even though he's old, like, oh God, I'll never forget that moment when he like, well, I don't want to spoil it, but like, the moment I'm talking about where you're fighting one, it's like,
what? You think you're fighting the final boss, which makes sense because, the other guy, is basically the main antagonist of
the whole game,
of the story.
Surprise.
And also, I thought it was such a cool way to get to fight this guy in his prime. It was really another great way that the storytelling and the gameplay and the mechanics and the music all sort of come together here. But yeah, I take your point, and I think that another way to say that might be that like it would be difficult to sing this music to somebody, to give them an idea. What are you going to sing? But it's great music. It does exactly what it's supposed to do in that kind of context, and I think it's really pretty masterful.
In some ways, I actually think that the ambient music in Sekiro is better than the ambient music in Elden Ring. Elden Ring is very, very wide and very like the quality in Sekiro. There's always a bit of like mysterious hiding, and there's that element of the shinobi sort of like really like even keeled, don't be seen, come get in, get out kind of. Especially not in the Senpo Temple necessarily, but even there's like stuff like this. Whereas in Elden Ring, it's much more of a mood and like a proper ambiance.
Very different. Different feel, right? It's much more kind of epic. It's in scale in Elden Ring. But we also feel that in the story, right? This is a more human story. Yeah. And the plot of it is much more clear. And as you say, this sort of the stealth element of the shinobi, I think also finds its way into the music and some of the spaces and the atmospheres that they give us. Once I got the hang of this game, it became probably my favorite FromSoft game. Oh yeah. It is also one of these games that like it's at some point, pretty much anybody who's going to plays this game will run into a wall. You know, it might be somewhere or another. And at some point, you're going to have to rewire a little bit your brain or your understanding of the mechanics so that you're reacting a little bit differently. And I think that's what I found to be super fun. It's sort of like retraining your brain so that you become, I don't know, a little bit more aggressive or less aggressive, or depending on what your personality is. You know, for me, I realized eventually that I wasn't quite being aggressive enough, that I needed to be more proactive to really sort of control the frame. Yeah. Another thing that really helped actually was in the Sword Saint Isshin was when I actually started using headphones, because I was just playing online. Oh. But the headphones really helped, because then I was starting to pick up more of these audio cues and realize that the different sounds that we get from, you know, either a perfect deflect or not, where that rhythm part of it was really was starting to help me. And then he went down pretty quickly, and then it was just one of these things, like he's super hard until he isn't anymore, and then you could just, you know, beat him every day without any trouble.
It's such an incredible fight. I mean, like, between all the Mikiri that he gives you and the ability to once you really understand like what is required of you for the Mikiri counter and for the jump, for the thrusts, or for the swipes. Honestly, like I actually feel like the third phase was my favorite, because once he started doing lightning, that was when you started to feel just so empowered. That's the same thing I feel with Genichiro, where actually that's the fight that I've gone back and tried just for fun a couple times, like after playing it. Genichiro, yeah. I just sorry, Genichiro. I did it the Italian way. Genichiro, that fight.
I have no idea if I'm pronouncing it right or not. I have no idea.
In terms of replayability, I think it's up to the subjective person. But for me personally, I think in some ways Sekiro is the most fun replayability, because the boss gauntlet, the opportunity to, once you've got it, you can you just get it. You know.
Oh yeah, I played this game more times than I can count, because once you've learned it, then you can. It's not a very long game. You can just just play through it. There's no trouble. The gauntlet was really fun. People often call Sekiro a rhythm game, and I agree with that. But I would actually say that to me, it's more sort of like a flow game, because it's not only about these rhythms, but it's also about the sort of like the ebb and flow between you and the person you're confronting. And it reminded me of this, I don't know if you ever read this book about flow state by that Hungarian psychologist, Mihai, Csikszentmihalyi, I think is roughly how you say it. But anyway, he talks about the importance of these states where you're kind of really in the zone. And I recognize it from music. People could also recognize it from learning. It's where and time starts to sort of function a little bit differently. It's where you're reading a book and suddenly 3 hours go by like that. You know, that would be an example of a flow state. And I think that in terms of games, Sekiro is a great representation of that, because as soon as it really clicks in like one of these emblematic fights, like with Genichiro or with Isshin, it just feels like you enter this other realm. And it will take some work in order to get there. But once you get there, it's so much fun.
Several of my playthroughs were 7 hours during the day, and I wouldn't even realize it. I would start at 10, and I would look over, and it was 3 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So Black Myth Wukong really.
That's next on our list here?
That's next. Yeah, Chapter 6 ending cutscene. What a game. Really so much charm and just it was hard. There were certain bosses that I wasn't able to beat. I know you beat every. We talked about it when you were playing it. We were playing it, I think, almost at the same time. The Scorpion was especially. Remember the Scorpion?
Oh man, he was tough. That for me, I think that was the tough. Him and Erlong were the toughest.
God, Erlong. Oh my God, yeah. Oh God, Erlong.
But yeah, the Scorpion. What was he called? The Scorpion Lord, the guy who gets pissed. Lord. Yeah, the guy who gets pissed off when you break his the vats of wine or whatever. So the guy's probably drunk, drunk as can be, and he still schools us. It's really very humbling.
The thing that kept me going with Black Myth Wukong was just how every corner you never knew what was going to be there, and there was always a new yokai, a new monster, a new mythological being. I mean, even in the first area, the green monster with the big head. I forget the name.
Oh yeah.
The first
you mean
wall, basically.
Yeah, or the first time we meet him when he's sort of optional.
Yes, over in the corner of the forest when you have to go. You're supposed to go straight, but you can go to the hang to the. Yes, you can hang to the right.
Yeah. I remember we fight him twice in that first chapter or whatever. And that first time we're really seriously under-leveled to fight him, and the second time we're it's a little bit better. But I thought that game was so special, and actually I think I played it maybe just like a week or so before you did.
Yes.
But I think it was you that put it on my radar.
I did.
Yeah, and I took a look at the trailer, and the gameplay looked really fun. And as soon as I started playing it, I was smitten. That opening cinematic scene, which is, I guess, kind of also the tutorial, but like I didn't know Journey to the West. I just sort of knew that it was this important piece of Chinese folk mythology and literature. Also that it had a bunch of adaptations or whatever. But even without knowing any of that context, you could feel from the opening cinematic that the mythology is very deep, and that a lot of love was put into this game.
Well, spoilers for anybody that is not aware, but this is the Chapter 6 ending cutscene.
What does it matter if you become a Buddha? That headband has always been on your head.
Keep those eyes wide open. Watch me rip it off and break free.
Sun Wukong, when you defied the Celestial Court, I had to seal you beneath the mountains with my immense power. Yet, after enduring punishment, you embraced the dark, uplifted good against evil, and subdued Yaoguais throughout the journey. For your contribution, I now bestow upon you the title of Victorious Fighting Buddha.
He defied the Celestial Court, and the Jade Emperor imposed 3 ordeals. Only when the chicken finishes pecking the rice, the dog laps up the flowers, and the lamp burns through the key, the rain will fall.
One final toast before we crash the Celestial Palace!
Wukong is just so cool.
The character or the game or both.
Really.
Both. Really. One thing that I thought was really special about this game was how incredibly creative its interaction with the mythology was and the book. And eventually I bought Journey to the West afterwards, and I read not the entire thing, not yet, but quite a lot of excerpts from spots that were really important in the game. And what was amazing to me was you could feel, well, it's really worth reading. It's the character is amazing, and it's quite different from a lot of what we're more used to in terms of Western mythology, which we see a lot of in Western movies and whatnot, and in just Western storytelling. But because Wukong's sort of development has a lot to do with this, it has this spiritual aspect to it, this kind of this awakening and this beautiful paradox of the victorious fighting Buddha, and these ideas of of sovereignty and what it's really very special. And I love the fact that the game was obviously not just inspired by the mythology, but really incorporated into its very fabric. Yeah. And these 6 cutscenes at the end of each chapter, I thought were some of the highlights of the game.
Yeah, I couldn't wait to see those cutscenes. What were you going to say? Sorry.
One thing I thought was particularly cool and why I chose this track is that I didn't realize it when I played the game, because I just played the game and was learning about Journey to the West as I was going. But that the theme that they use for this final cutscene is, of course, based on this famous television version of Journey to the West that from the 80s that apparently everybody in China knows, kind of like our Star Wars or something like that. Like everybody would have grown up with this, and just like everybody can recognize the main theme from Star Wars. For them, this. So already I loved it. I can just imagine how amazing it would have been for somebody who grew up with that and then finally gets to play this in a video game that's so lovingly constructed.
But that's just it. You can tell that it's made with a lot of passion and love and dedication to the source material to really own it, and then also like showcase it in a big way. I mean, I think like the game is so well done, and I think I felt when after I finished it that I felt like it was really just one of these pieces of just artistic representation of just like the power of the medium of culture and how to connect people in no dissimilar way that we would try to connect with somebody by having them listen to a Verdi or Puccini opera or something. It was very just the artistic merit of this game was extremely high.
I think that's interesting that you mention Verdi and Puccini, because in the 19th century their music was popular music. When Verdi was writing a new opera or Puccini was writing a new opera, people came to it and they would talk about it in the same way that they would talk about a film or a video game or a book nowadays. It had a certain kind of cultural relevance. And I guess this was maybe because I played this game, it was one of my first times playing a game more or less when it came out. So I was a little bit more plugged into kind of the community, the conversation around it. And one thing that really struck me was the vitality of the conversation around it. Suddenly people are uploading, I saw that you did some videos about the music, which were really great. Other people were doing videos about the gameplay or sort of like helping people get a handle on the mechanics. And there were a whole series of videos that were meant to help introduce people like you and me to the mythology of Journey to the West, and going through and really explaining like this comes from this and from this chapter and whatnot, and really dissecting these cutscenes as well. This last one is particularly interesting because the animation that we see is basically the story of Journey to the West told backwards. Mm-hmm. And I just thought this was so amazing to see how vibrant and invested the community is and how big this conversation is. And in a way, it does harken back to that, the apex of opera, which is probably in the 19th century, when you had composers like this who were very, very much a main part of the cultural conversation.
Yeah, I know. This game is really special. I actually should go back and replay it. I know that I don't know if the DLC's out.
I think I would have heard about that, but I know that they announced that a DLC is coming, but
Yes,
I don't think we've
that's
got it yet. I will be delighted to go now, having read a bit of Journey to the West, to go back and play it again will be a lot of fun.
Actually, they actually sent me a really beautiful care package. Hold on, let me show you something.
Who sent you? Is this the game developers?
Look at this.
Wow.
Yeah. They sent me like socks and a shirt and jackets and yeah, this is really, really like I almost don't want to take it out of the packaging just because it's like
that is incredible. Wow.
The next game we're gonna talk about, is look at that is it's very special. We're about to talk about Clair Obscur Expedition 33, so I know it's still early days. It's only been out for a couple months, so just be incredibly cautious. We're going to dive into some pretty heavy spoiler discussions, so if you don't want to be spoiled, definitely come back to the video or skip ahead in the timestamps. I wonder, for me, it was monumental, and it may very well be the game of a generation. I mean, I think it really just Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is really just something just massively special. And I know, I don't know if you had seen it, or I'm sure you saw it on the news. So for you as a person, a person at this point, I would say you're more French than an expat, but like as a French, I guess a French person, let's just say it. How did this feel like this game experience for you?
I heard sort of tangentially about this game, that there was this important game, coming out, and that it was released by a small, an independent studio. This was their first title. I think they had about 30 people working on the development of this game, which is, obviously a pretty small team for a game of this scale. But because I was in the middle of this Mad Lad Soul Level 1 adventure, I didn't play it straight away. I had to wait for my break between Dark Souls 3 DLC and the 2 DLCs, and then starting Bloodborne. And that's when I got a message from you saying, by the way, you have got to play this game. You're going to love this. It's right up your alley. And so I started playing it immediately. And it's one of those games, again, where as soon as you start playing it, you can feel that there's something very special about it. That a lot of... that it's really a labor of love, and they really had something to say in this game. And you can feel this in the art direction, in the story, which, hits some very important emotional beats right from the very beginning, right from the prologue, before you really start playing. And it just gets even more and more beautiful and richly complex. And one of the things I loved about it was the fact that the story that you think is being told at the beginning of the game really isn't the story. It's later on in chapter 2 Act 2, I think it's called. The pieces start coming together, and we realize that what we thought was this sort of sci-fi apocalypse sort of tale is that much more a tale about a family dealing with grief and unspeakable loss. And so it becomes much more intimate and heartfelt in a way than we had even thought, even though we had already had a couple of, really painful moments. And we already experienced loss by that point in the game as well. And then also, plus the visuals are great. The gameplay is really fun. I would say is really, I would call this really a rhythm game, in the sense that it's very much about sort of like memorizing these patterns and patterns. Yeah. I also saw that the music for this game was getting a lot of love on social media, absolutely justifiably so, because every bit of the soundtrack is great. There are a couple tracks in particular that are getting a lot of play and a lot of love on social media, which is great. And there's this the one that I wanted to listen to with you today and kind of share with your listeners and also hear what you had to say about it, is this one called Aline. This theme, it doesn't, like, just according to the YouTube views, it doesn't seem to be as popular as some of the other ones. It's still super popular, but a little bit less than a couple of the other emblematic tracks. But this was the one that just knocked me for a loop. thought it was so beautiful. And this is really once we start to understand more about the real story of the game when we hear this.
What I think is really gorgeous about this track in particular is that you start to sort of see like you start to sort of unravel like the grief of a mother and like what it means to, you know, be a person that loses a son and like, you know, and how I mean, I don't quite remember when this plays because there's so much. Also, you know, it's interesting. Like I had such a monumentally impactful experience with this game, and I probably won't replay it for a long time just because I actually I still think about it every day, but which is wild. But the actual act of playing it again, I need space from it because of how monumentally emotional it was.
Yeah, it's. I understand that exactly. There are some. It's the same with some books and some music, right? Sometimes you close that book and you're like, okay, it's going to be a good while before I revisit that,
if ever. And it doesn't mean that you don't love it. It's just like the thing. Just like Anyway, let's listen to Aline.
Sors et fuis, je t'en prie. Fuis ce tableau maudit, cette toile d'une fausse vie. Portrait rêvé, imparfait, chaîne de ta liberté. Alors tranchons la trame, découle la sinistre esquisse. Sors et fuis, je t'en prie. Fuis ce tableau maudit, cette toile d'une fausse vie. Portrait rêvé, imparfait, chaîne de ta liberté.
I don't know how much French melody you've done. I mean, I'm sure you've done your fair share, but like to me, it feels like the natural evolution of like French melody, like Fauré, you know, even Duparc, certainly Debussy. Like there's this quality in it. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, like that was the thing when I first heard this, even glimmers of it. I was like, well, I don't know how this game is gonna go, but like what I'm hearing right now is literally like the evolution of French chanson, which to me was really, really exciting because I had done and sung so much French chanson. It's really extraordinary. There's so many like little details, and I'm sure as a French speaker, and I haven't spoken French in like 3 years at this point. There's something about the lilt in the French that I find just so captivating, and the way that there's this a bit of rubato or push and pull when she goes, you know, triste no modi da 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 da, and it's amazing how there's that little corner, even though the whole thing it's so expressive and spoken, you know, when she goes alors da da da. As we think of French language, we really think, I mean, I'm talking to you as if I know you know this, but like when we think of the French language, we really think of it as, you know, a stream of water more so than like a plosive or consonant focused language, obviously. And there's just something about the emphasis in that track, and especially in those moments that I mentioned where it's like the emphasis in the almost the accentation of the French language, I think really like rhythmically like does this thing of just like sticking into your like.
I like that water idea, because it can be quite difficult to sort of talk about what makes something sound French or German or Russian or American. We kind of try to, if we compare sort of like a sort of French sound or French music with something more sort of Russian. If we were talking about two liquids, we would probably say that, you know, Russian music and Russian language is kind of like a thicker sort of liquid. So the rubato sort of happens in a more sustained kind of way. And we can hear this with French versus Russian singers or French versus Russian orchestras. Right. And I think in this, I mean, all through the soundtrack, but in this this clip in particular, we really do get a great sense of this, you know, beautiful French style that is so in tune with the music and also with the situation of the game at this point. I think it's also wonderful that the composer and actually, if I remember correctly, the composer and the soprano, when they saw each other for the first time to like just deciding whether or not to work together, they kind of sat down and they were like, well, let's improvise some things and let's see if we can make some music together. So she also contributed to the composition in a way by proposing a certain vocal line and whatnot. So this was kind of like composed by the composer, but also with input from the soloist. And I think that's one of the reasons that we can feel a really beautiful marriage of, you know, material and style and performance. And also you can feel that they knew that they were taking part in something really special. You can, you know, you can feel it in the sounds, and the music video, you can see it in their faces. The whole soundtrack I liked really very much, but for me, this was kind of a standout track. And the fact that it comes in I think it comes at a couple points in the game, but where I most remember it, where it's really sort of like center stage, is where more of the story of the paintress is coming into focus. Like who she is really, what's her role. I think it's just before the battle with her. So towards the end of Act 2.
I think does it reappear when she's being held, when they're like setting her back? Someone in the comments will know.
Another thing I thought was super interesting about the music is that there are a lot of sort of mini spoilers in the text.
That's what a lot of French people said.
Yeah, but also even from the French people, they hid some of these spoilers because not all of the songs are in French. Some of them are in a language. I'm not sure if it's technically considered another language or a dialect called Occitan, or the La Langue d'Oc, which is a version of French, or a kind of it might be a slightly different language, though there are some things in common, that's really spoken around the South. I don't speak it. I don't, you know, there are some like roots and things that I would recognize, but I don't want to, you know, to talk about something that I don't really know. But anyway, if you can see the text when it's in La Langue d'Oc, and then you see the translation of it, you're like, oh yeah, they're really giving away a couple little story beats in here, but because this is a language that very few people speak, it's kind of hidden.
You hadn't played like a turn-based RPG.
No, I didn't even, when you said, hey, you should look this up, and I said, you know, I looked up the thing, and it's like a turn-based RPG. I was like, no, the turn-based JRPG, is that right? Yeah, Japanese and I was RPG, like, turn-based, what on earth does that mean? Is Final Fantasy, are those turn-based games? That's the...
Yeah. After 10, it deviates, but from 10, you should really play Final Fantasy 10. You should really play Final Fantasy 9.
Okay.
Just 8, 7. 7 recently had remake versions. There's a remake and Rebirth, but the story is sort of, it's the original story, but it just deviates ever so slightly, and it gets a little bit bigger. I think it might be worth it for you to play the OG. Final Fantasy 6 has an opera scene in it.
Yeah, I think I've heard something about this, but this is all like uncharted territory for me. So.
And actually, if you're cool with it, I know that we did have a couple other things that you had brought, but with the Demon Souls compare and contrast, but I actually was hoping that maybe I could take some time and
absolutely, let's
ruin your life further.
Dude, let's
with more music.
let's go for it. I'm really glad we got to share a little bit about Clair Obscur though, because
It was so beautiful.
I know that was a very special game for me. I know it was for you as well. And I don't know the people involved in this game, but I lived for 4 years in Montpellier. Right. So just the fact that this studio came from Montpellier was really delighted to see what a huge success it was. Also, they found all these clever ways, little references to French culture and French language, and little sort of inside jokes and things with certain character names or enemy names, and it was really it was just super fun. And all this with a really heartfelt story that poses interesting philosophical questions, and just. Yeah, absolutely. 10 out of 10 game.
The conversation around the endings are really interesting too, because there's really no clear cut what's right and what's wrong with the endings. There's no, if you pick one over the other, it's like, why? Well, because of this. Okay, well, and then you get into an argument about it, and it's like, well, they're both kind of like, they're not great. Both of them are kind of like, oof, they're both heavy.
Yeah,
they work for
because both are dealing with grief and loss, and there's no, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. There's just conversations to be had, and maybe the way for some person isn't exactly the right way for the other person. But I do like this about, I guess, all of the games that we've talked about, in maybe with the exception of Wukong. For Wukong, I know that this Erlong ending is like considered to be like the secret ending or whatever, but for me that's really the true ending of the game, and that's the one where everything falls into place. Yeah. Whereas for all the other ones, Dark Souls, even Sekiro, I think you could have. I think of the endings, there are two of them that are quite that are good endings that you could make a sort of case for as being, like,
with the exception of one.
Well, one is like unequivocally
the bad ending.
I saw some message from somebody on Twitter or whatnot, and somebody who had just like, clicked the button too many times to like move through the dialogue, and they ended, and they locked themselves into the Shura ending. The other three endings are kind of beautiful in their own way, of which two of them I think are particularly interesting. But Dark Souls is the same, right? All these questions about what do we do with these endless cycles, and the kindling of the fire, or ushering in an age of dark or something, are also like, you can equally justify either of them depending on all kinds of different things, and they're all beautiful in their own way.
This game was recently titled the Gooner Game of the Year. Do you know what? Well, okay, I don't want to. Do you know what gooning is?
No, what's the Gooner Game of the Year?
We won't get into it, but needless to say, in your spare time, just look up on Urban Dictionary. Just look up what gooning is.
Okay,
or
hang on.
Gooner is
Not helping me. A person who commits the act of gooning. Okay.
Yeah. An individual who practices gooning, which is there you go. Well, okay. So it's a game out of South Korea that is really, really, it's made by a company called Shift Up, and Shift Up has a gacha game called Nikkei Goddess of Victory, where if you look it up, Nikkei Goddess of Victory essentially is a scantily clad women with an incredible, you come for the women and you stay for the story.
And you stay for the story and the gameplay?
And the gameplay.
Nice.
You come for the gameplay and stay for the gameplay. And the story. And so Stellar Blade was their first venture into AAA gaming, and like really producing something that, wasn't related to this gacha system and all this other stuff. Not a mobile game, essentially. Okay. And it has one of the best soundtracks. Honestly, in my mind, it should have won Soundtrack of the Year last year. It recently had a PC release, and so there's been a little bit more content, the complete package. It's essentially Sekiro Lite. You play as Eve, and I think people call it the Gooner Game of the Year because Eve, she's very buxom, and she's actually based off of an actual person, a model, and they don't shy away from showing her skin and showcasing her femininity and so on and so forth. And the story is okay. The story is nothing too crazy. In fact, it borrows from this Nier Automata game that I'd like to play some music for as well. But so it really borrows from that. And in fact, the guy who created Yoko Taro, who created Nier Automata, actually praised Stellar Blade for being he wishes he could have made a game in that vein, and so on and so forth. But the fights are awesome, and the soundtrack is awesome. Regardless of the conversation, I think it's a little reductive to reduce Eve to just how she looks. Whatever, that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, well, without knowing the ins and outs of the debate, that doesn't sound like it's really, either it's a good game or it's not, right? Neither. Either it's
It
fun
is.
to play and it's, you know, and the combat
It's a whole long
is cool, or-
conversation about yeah. Anyway, in this complete edition, one of the things that you can do is this a battle with one of the characters from Nikke named Scarlet, who's essentially a very well-spoken Shakespearean, almost samurai-like woman. Obviously, she's beautiful. The focus here is on beautiful characters, and I wanted to play just phase 2 of this battle with Scarlet because it's actually mind-blowing. I just heard it, and I'm going to be playing this game in my spare time so I can finish and get to this fight because the fight is crazy. And as a person who adores Sekiro, I actually think you would go nuts for Stellar Blade. It's not as polished, but it's a really well-made game. And you can see a bit of the fight on the screen as well if you want to. That's Scarlet.
That's super cool. It's amazing how there's just such a huge variety of styles that we can find in these games. And this one, I mean, if it's sort of, as you say, it's kind of like Sekiro light or maybe Sekiro influenced. So it would mean that like the flow, I imagine, in the combat is super important. And this music kind of has that that sort of groove element that would lend itself really well to, and I love this, this drum break in the middle of phase 2. This is great.
I mean, I've never heard something like that. It's basically like art. It's like bongo core, basically. You know, like you take. I've never heard anything like that. And the thing is, actually, the soundtrack is really really diverse, and there's a couple of like legitimately mesmerizing operatic pieces as well, including the final boss, and then also this piece called Demo Crawler, which I'll send to you separately. I also really like this particular theme because I feel the flow because it's basic. Eve has a hairpin that she pulls out and turns into a sword, which is I think kind of really charming. But then Scarlet here is like
it's almost sort of like Wukong-ish, isn't it? Because he stores his
in the ear.
yeah. Which also comes exactly from Journey to the West.
That's true. That's right.
Well, it's maybe a sort of like oblique reference, but I think anybody in Southeast Asia would be like, yeah, absolutely, it's got to be possible. A Wukong reference.
It's possible. Scarlet is such like a samurai, so to me it also like matches her energy. You know what I mean? The way that
Scarlet's the person we're fighting in that during that music.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And yeah, so I thought that was really nice and fun. I wanted to pivot over to, since we were talking about Nier. So Stellar Blade, I think, was heavily inspired by Nier Automata, and I know that I've mentioned Nier to you, and it would certainly be a big deviation from the games that you're used to playing, you know, this sort of Souls-like FromSoft formula. What I really like about Nier is that it's one of the first games to, not the first, but it's a game that when I was experiencing a boss fight that was heavily using vocals, I was like, this is unique. And as the game progressed, I was like, oh, this is really unique. And musically, there's really nothing like it. I mean, it's like one of the most pristine, majestic soundtracks I've ever heard. And the gameplay is interesting because it'll oscillate between 2D action. So like, think like, you know, any of the games that you would have maybe seen in an arcade in the 90s, coupled with 3D, coupled with, then there's also multiple endings, which you already are used to, thanks to games like Sekiro, like we've mentioned, or even Clair Obscur, where in this case, you have to go through the endings in order to actually get where you want to go. There's, I believe, it's either 3 or 5 endings, and the 5th ending is the true ending. And I know you like that, so I do.
Yeah, I do. I spent a long time sort of thinking at the end of Dark Souls 3, like, okay, which ending is the Sekiro in particular, you know? So I just had to play them all, you know, to see.
I mean, this game is just so special. I actually really don't want to tell you much about it because I personally think there's a lot of sales coming up right now because it's the summer, and I think if you get the chance, a Nier Automata, I think would be a game that you would love.
Yeah, this one is on my list because you've mentioned this game to me, because I think the last time we exchanged a couple messages, maybe like post Sekiro or something like that, and you had some suggestions for me. Yeah. And so I've got a couple things on this list that I need to get to, and Nier Automata is on that list. And also, I guess it was when I finished Clair Obscur. Just out of curiosity, I went on to ChatGPT and I said, because I had talked, you know, with ChatGPT, whatever that means, a fair bit about about some of these games, and I said, well, now you start to know my taste in video games or whatnot. Can you suggest some other things that, and this was on its list as well. So ChatGPT seconds your recommendation.
This is a beautiful song, and it actually is an opera boss of all things. It's a fictional language, by the way. Yeah, so that's just one taste of that. I don't know if you saw a look at if you were watching the gameplay as well. Also, did you notice that?
I saw.
It sounds like she's saying "Fa male qui nel cuore," which is really cool. The Chaos language is a mixture of a bunch of different languages, kind of smashed together, created by Emmy Evans, who was the singer, and Janique Nicole.
I was wondering because you're picking up bits of things that that you understand and
I had the music on my PlayStation 4 when you used to be able to like customize it and have a display on, and it was a Nier Automata display. And for 3 years, I was like, I don't understand the lyrics. It's because it's gibberish. Because it's not gibberish, but it's Chaos language. It's not understandable.
So they just take because for I was sure I recognized a couple words here, and then suddenly I don't have no idea what's happening. And,
There's a track called "Voice of No Return" that basically is just French, but French that you can never understand. So but there's French words in it. It's really funny. But what do you make of that piece? I mean,
but that's pretty cool. And the gameplay looks like something that I would have fun playing. And this was it's got this sort of electric, sort of very sort of fast forward motion kind of energy to it, but also a couple of beautiful melodies in it. And it's got some lovely vocal lines.
It's one of my favorite soundtracks ever made. And the thing is that there's not all of it's fast. Some guitar, there's some piano, there's some real ambient vocal writing. If you liked Claire Obscure's sort of vocal heavy writing, this is it's so good. And Stellar Blade's similar, where the vocals are actually indicative of Eve, because Eve is an android, and so you actually end up getting more of Eve's personality through the music versus through her herself, who's a little bit more closed off or tightly wound. Which is neat.
Interesting. I did think that in Clair Obscur, this was really the tremendous variety of the music really had a lot to do with our understanding of these really quite varied group of characters, and also the differences in orchestration. I mean, for Nier Automata, I'd have to hear a few more different tracks from the game to understand kind of how they are situated, one with another. Whereas something in Clair Obscur that I thought was amazing, that we have such a wide variety of orchestration, right? There are things for solo chorus, there are things that are kind of more rock inspired, and then there are these really intimates, like the one we listened to, Aline, is just maybe just a chamber group of strings, 6 players and a couple vocalists, and that sounds very cool. I will bump that maybe higher on the list. But Stellar Blade was also on the list. I think also because that you had mentioned to me that if you like the sort of timing and the parry based kind of games
parry
and
stuff, so I mean it makes sense that it should be pretty high up.
Yeah, it's super fun because I really like once again, I think it's kind of like the flow element that is great. And when you find soundtracks, it sounds like Nier Automata, but also like Sekiro, these games that sort of help you find the flow with the music as well are really really great fun.
Another game that I just put 100 hours actually into was Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, which are available.
Okay, what is that?
So Monster Hunter, okay, you know how you fight bosses in Souls games? Well, in Monster Hunter, that's also what you do. You just fight monsters, and that literally that's what it is. You pick one of, I forget how many, I think it's 12 weapons, whether it's switch axe, dual blade, gun lance, long sword, you name it. There's something there, for there's even a musical themed instrument called the hunting horn, which is basically a massive horn, and everything is just about putting out musical notes, and they give you buffs and debuffs. And I fell in love with the switch axe because, like you, I love Bloodborne, and switch axe switches between an axe and a sword. And the sword is where you output most of your damage.
So it's like one of these Bloodborne trick weapons.
Exactly. And there's also a charge blade as well that's between a sword and shield and a massive sword. And the gun lance, which is a lance that also shoots gunfire. The whole scope of the game is basically besting monsters and beating them. These, I mean, they're massive. And this particular one is Malzeno. And Malzeno and Primordial Malzeno, which I won't spoil for you, are part of the Sunbreak expansion. So you could spend hundreds of hours in Monster Hunter. You could just continue to, hunt monsters. And then the cool thing is that you kill them, carve their bodies, and then use their bodies to build better armor and better weaponry. Monster Hunter World and the most recent Monster Hunter Wilds that just came out, those are more about the ecology of the landscape, the world, especially World, you can like track the monsters by finding their footprints, and it's a bit slower paced, whereas Rise and Sunbreak were originally made for the Nintendo Switch, and so they're part of the portable series, which are more about which is more of an old school approach maybe, of getting from point A to point B and just immediately going and finding the monster and fighting it. Wilds recently came out. It's having some pretty optimization issues, and it's a little bit too early in its life cycle. Monster Hunter kind of comes in groupings, and so you have to wait kind of for the really difficult part, which is usually the expansion. They kind of make the game more difficult as it progresses with this thing called G rank. But Malzeno is essentially one of the sort of musical peaks of the game. It's a dragon inspired by Dracula. And there's the organ to symbolize the Dracula.
Super cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so fun. The so many surprising elements of rhythmic interplay. How many beats we're sort of feeling, like when we feel that there's sort of like quite a lot of sort of fast beats, or when it sort of like opens out into more, and we're really feeling it like a la breve. And it's really that track is terrific. That sounds like exactly what you want to hear when you're fighting some. Is the picture that was in the track, that's the boss?
That's Malzeno,
like this,
yeah.
This giant.
That's his first version, not Primordial, which I don't want to spoil for you. But when I tell you that, like, beating Primordial Malzeno after like 100 hours of play, like, was such a it was probably more like 80 at that point, but it was like it was an absolute peak of my gaming life. And Monster Hunter, I mean, I've always appreciated it, but what I really like is that Rise is the base game of this particular iteration, and it takes place in like a Japanese theme. So there's like some really beautiful, almost like kabuki theater introductions of the monsters. The monsters are really the focal point. It's not you as a player, it's the monsters, and the monsters all have their individual personalities. The way that they fight is very unique. As you progress, you start to fight harder and harder versions of them. Then you get into the Elder Dragons, which there's like tons of. The Elder Dragons all have their unique mechanics. Chameleos is literally like a chameleon dragon that goes invisible and spits acid. There's like a jaguar, Narcocuga. Then you get into Sunbreak and you go into this, you enter this place called Elgato, and it's this very westerny, like accordion, just the most beautiful music. And then you fight like literally Satan, Geismagorm, and like I'm telling you, like it's peak, dude. Like I actually think like I think you would love Monster Hunter. And also the music is just like this. It's just all of the series has just this phenomenal orchestration that is both Western, Eastern. I mean, heavily. I think of all the stuff that I listen to on a day-to-day basis, I think Monster Hunter is the most primed to just be picked up and placed in an orchestra in a symphony hall without any explanation, and people would lose their marbles. They'd be like, "Who's this new composer?"
Where is this rhythmic interplay coming from, or this is so?
It's
like,
extraordinary.
It has at the same time this element of kind of like surprise and groove at the same time, which is really which is really fun. And also, it's from what you're saying, I can tell this is such a it's such a deep pool. There's so much to and this is one of the things that I think is really wonderful about this this sort of universe. And I kind of got a glimpse of this last summer. I have two nephews, Bennett and Graham, ages 7 and 11. And when Graham turned 10, I guess it was, I offered him for his birthday a copy of Breath of the Wild. And he didn't have a Switch, but my parents have a Switch, and I kind of thought, like, I feel like this game is going to be something special for some of the reasons that you just evoked. Like, when you start going into it, there's so much to learn about it. There's rich lore that has even just sort of like moral and philosophical and like sort of mythical implications. Like, why do these quest objectives appeal to us so much? And so last summer, I finally got the chance to sit down and sort of introduce him to the game a bit. And both of them just loved this game. Like, it was just, and they sort of play it together. Like Graham, who's older and 11, he runs the controller, and Bennett, he watches with such rapt attention what's going on the screen, and he's full of ideas. He's like, "Oh, why don't you try this? Or maybe you could, try and cook this with that or whatnot. Or hey, did you notice this over there?" Like, so this element of sort of like transmission and introducing somebody to something new, which you've now done for me many times, and always to my, to my increasing happiness, because all these suggestions have been terrific.
Yeah, I think that's why video games are so amazing. Is that like even if you're a person like me who just loves variety and just will buy every single new game, and I feel privileged that I'm able to do that, but there's just always something new to discover and explore. Or when you get sucked in and suddenly 100 hours goes by and you've played a game, and it leaves you. And the thing is, like, it's not a shallow experience. These games are really meaningful, and they leave you with these life-changing thoughts that impact you actually, fundamentally as a person. Or if you want to waste time and just try to get good, you can do that in different ways too,
Well, there are games for all kinds of personalities, right? But this was, when Graham and Bennett finally beat Waterblight Ganon, or beat their first Lionel or whatnot, the pride in their voices when they told me, like, we finally.
That's so adorable.
And also, they were quite receptive to the music as well. I remember the first time without spoiling anything, I was sort of like gently guiding them along and I mentioned that it's sort of early-ish in their playthrough. I thought, I think you guys are ready to go to Hyrule Castle a little early and maybe just like get some good weapons and things like that. And so I'll kind of help you get there. And once we started approaching the castle, that music, it's clicked in, and I told them, guys, this is my favorite part of the soundtrack, I really think. And they didn't really respond because they were so intensely concentrated on their gameplay and whatnot. But, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes later, Bennett, he turns to me and he's like, "You're right, Toe, this music is amazing." That was like, this is so great. The joy to be able to sort of transmission, and like remembering that when I was their age, it was a totally different version of Zelda, but that I fell in love with. And now I see the whole thing happening again. It's great.
In real time. I know, it's an amazing feeling. That's why I love doing videos like this. And so this last song is from Hollow Knight. And have you ever played Hollow Knight?
No.
Hollow Knight is essentially, so obviously we're talking, most of the games we're talking about are 3D, obviously 3D formats. Hollow Knight is essentially a 2D Souls game, in essence. Really, it's a Metroidvania, and Metroidvania is obviously a Metroid, which was a game on the Nintendo systems, and then Castlevania is the Vania part. Castlevania is, an iconic series, and essentially combines those formats and then also adds a layer of challenge that you would probably find, dodging, parrying, using abilities and things like that. And there's I think we will officially get the sequel, which has been literally, I think like 8 or 9 years. Like, people are dying waiting for the sequel to come out, with bated, and I wanted to just play this little sample of something from Silksong. This will probably be out. I think the rumor is the fall. But Hollow Knight is a great game, a really good experience. I actually want to replay it because I played it when it first came out in 2018. And this is Lace from Silksong.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's just great. That's just terrific writing, right? Super virtuosic, playful, energetic, these great syncopations. It's kind of got this dancey element, but also enough textural variety. Some of these moments that sing a little bit more, and that is terrific.
This is even out. This sample of Silksong has been sitting around for 5 years now, which is crazy. Like, the game isn't even out.
But so what happened? The studio just released this this. Here's a taster of what we're working on, and everybody's
5 years ago.
Yeah, it's like GTA 6.
Yeah, I know.
People have been waiting for this game for 10 years.
Silksong is going to be really good, and Hollow Knight, because you love this approach to gaming, I think it would be really interesting for you as well to add Hollow Knight to your list, because Hollow Knight deviates while also retaining some of that structure that you, I think, enjoy in gaming. And then I think that this is just Hollow Knight would be a great addition to your list, especially over the summer, to prep you if, Silksong is, the release is, any day, guys. But it could be imminent. It could be as early as July. It could be August. It could be September. So
this also is something I think is super cool about the gaming community, like the expectation, the anticipation of these things, and then the conversation about once a game sort of comes out and everybody is sharing different thoughts and ideas about it, and it was sometimes super interesting, super heartfelt, or I saw people, mentioning about their reaction to Clair Obscur and the people who have lost people in their lives and how deeply touched they were by it, or all the way to just hilarious things. We never spoke about this, but I wanted to ask you, do you remember when, this was like back the year when Elden Ring came out, that Elon Musk, he tweeted out something like, playing Elden Ring and having a great time or something. And somebody, do you remember this story? And somebody said in the comments or whatever on Twitter, drop your build, So Elon tweeted out what his Elden Ring build was, and it was nonsensical. It's just complete and utter nonsense. And so I thought this was pretty hilarious, because suddenly you had like everybody clowning on this, like the richest guy in the world here, who is who's playing Elden Ring, I guess, the way at least we know that he actually did play this game, because because you couldn't possibly come up with this build any other way, And then the other people started, after a while, then people started doing these challenge runs, like, can I beat Malenia, like with Elon Musk's, Elden Ring build and whatnot. And once again, it's just sort of like, it sort of underlines kind of like the vitality of the community and how alive it is and how much, enthusiasm and passion there is for these things.
I ranked the Dark Souls, every FromSoft besides Armored Core's main, which you should put on your list, Armored Core 6, by the way.
It's on the list.
Yeah, I figured. I ranked every opening of Dark Souls of FromSoft games, and I actually ranked the Demon Souls remake slightly higher than Demon Souls. And I saw on Reddit someone had posted it, like Marco Meatball's tier list, and someone saw that I'd ranked the remake higher than the original, and they were like, "Who cares?" It was just so funny how passionate this community is, for better or for worse. I mean, there's some
for better and for worse. There's good and bad in that,
Yeah, but
mostly good, I think, as long as you don't take it all too seriously.
Yeah, I had a laugh because I was like, "Sorry, guys. I mean, what do you want me to do? Like, I actually really like the remake, and I like the original too. There's no anyway.
I hadn't. It was because you introduced me to the Demon Souls soundtrack the last time we spoke. At that point, I hadn't yet played the game, and I saw somebody in the comments, said something about this, as well, like, oh, it's a shame that they listened to the remaster. And I already thought the remaster was, the soundtrack that you played me was great and whatever. And then I went and I played the remaster, and then I went and listened to some of the soundtrack from the original, which you can find on YouTube. And it's true that it's so different. It gives a really different, emotional feeling to the game. So maybe I'm not sure how I would even go about playing the older version. You'd have to get some older game system or something.
You'd have to buy a PS2.
Yeah. So yeah. I doubt that's going to happen. So I'm probably just going to live with the PS5 remake.
Just
but it was
someone's playthrough.
Yeah, but it was super cool to hear the difference between the remaster, and it actually reminded me of this Russian composer Mussorgsky, who he was a bit of a crazy guy, and his music was brilliant, but also sometimes not really very practical. Rimsky-Korsakov was alive around the same time. He sort of took Mussorgsky's pieces and he reworked quite a few of them and kind of did a sort of a remastered version, as it were, even of some really famous tracks like the Night on Bald Mountain. The version that's usually played is the Rimsky-Korsakov remaster, but you can still go and find the Mussorgsky original, and it's super interesting to compare both of them. And of course, you can have an opinion one way or the other. I mean, nobody's right about this, but you can't be right for all time about this, at any rate. But it's just interesting to see that in the gaming community there was somebody like who was fighting for the OG soundtrack just as much as some conductor will really, fight for the Mussorgsky original. The Mussorgsky original. It's the same conversation. Basically with the same arguments. It was super fun.
Well, Robert, I appreciate you coming on. It's always a treat to have friends just sort of, especially because I feel I feel responsible for your gaming renaissance. So I take full credit. And
I thank you. I've had an absolute blast, and this is still having fun. I mean, the Bloodborne DLC is pretty rough at Blood Level 4, but I'll get it done. I got Lady Maria, Orphan, and Lawrence still left to go.
That's right. And if you're in France and you want to check out Robert's performances, well, we should put your website on the description.
Yeah, great. I'll link. I'll send you my stuff, and you can link my socials or whatnot. It'd be great.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for watching. We'll see y'all later.
Thanks so much.
Everybody.
Bye, everyone.